Welcome to Get Your Spirit in Shape, United Methodist Communications and UMC.org's podcast to help keep our souls as healthy as our bodies. I'm Joe Iovino. Today we have the privilege of meeting Bishop Laurie Haller, who serves the Iowa Conference of the United Methodist Church. Early in high school, Bishop Haller was drawn to the pipe organ.
When I was in ninth grade, we built a new church and happened to contract with the Fisk Organ Company in Massachusetts to build a tracker action pipe organ.
Soon after, she started taking lessons and later earned a bachelor's and master's degrees in organ performance.
Once I went to college and grad school and kind of felt that tugging in my heart toward ministry.
Bishop Haller was ordained in the General Conference Mennonite Church and later transferred her ordination to the United Methodist Church. In addition to being a bishop, she's an author and an endurance athlete.
I also ride a bike. I've done triathlons. I've run the Boston Marathon 10 times.
Recently, Bishop Laurie had a God moment that called to mind that time in her life when she first fell in love with the pipe organ.
About a year ago, one of our churches here in Iowa was ravaged by a tornado. Their church happened to have the largest pipe organ in the whole state. And I said to them, you know, I used to play the organ. When you get that organ rebuilt, just let me know and I'll come and play a piece. They now have an organ company, which happens to be, coincidentally, or a God thing, the very same organ company in Massachusetts that built the organ in my home Mennonite Church in Pennsylvania.
Meet Bishop Laurie Haller. Bishop Laurie, welcome to Get Your Spirit in Shape.
Thank you, Joe.
When I read your biography, one of the things that leapt off the page for me is that you have both a bachelor's and a master's degree in organ performance. When did you start playing music?
Well, I've always loved music. I've gone to church my whole life, and I happened to grow up in the General Conference Mennonite Church in southeastern Pennsylvania. And when I was in ninth grade, we moved. We built a new church because we were outgrowing the church we had in town. We moved to the outskirts of town, built a church, and happened to contract with the Fisk Organ Company in Massachusetts to build a tracker action pipe organ. Now, that's very unusual for a Mennonite church, but our congregation had a great history of music. My father was on the building committee. He's also a singer, so he was instrumental in having this organ built. And so when I was in 11th grade, we'd already been in the new church for about a year, and I was fascinated by this freestanding, gorgeous organ, and I attended an organ recital by a member of our church. She was an organ major at Susquehanna University in Pennsylvania, and she was playing her senior organ recital at our church, and I went with my mom and dad. I was in 10th grade at the time, and she just transported me to a place I'd never been, especially when she played Bach. And so I was just, I didn't know what to make of this. I was just so fascinated. And then less than a month after that recital, Joan Keller, the young woman who played the recital, was killed in a tragic car accident.
Oh.
It was just, it just took me aback, especially because her father was our associate pastor at the church.
Whoa.
And a person that I loved and knew very well. He was my pastor. And so a few months later, I went to my dad and said, you know, I think I want to learn how to play the organ. Well, by then I was starting 11th grade, and people don't usually start playing a keyboard instrument that late, although I'd had a few piano lessons here and there over the years. But I just fell in love with organ, and I got a really good organ teacher from the area, and so that started my journey into church music. So I went to college at Wittenberg University and majored in organ and had a chance to study in Berlin, Germany for a year, and then I went to grad school, and that was my life.
So did you serve as a church organist for some time?
I did when I was in graduate school, when I was at Yale University, and during the 4 years I was there, when I got my music degree, master's degree, and then my MDiv, I was the director of music at a United Methodist Church in Stratford, Connecticut. And that was my first introduction to the United Methodist Church.
You said you grew up in the Mennonite Church, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
And there's ties between the Mennonites and the Methodists that go way back to the very beginnings of the Methodist Church.
Well, I think there are some. And actually the Mennonites and the Methodists share a deep love and a passion for evangelical piety and social justice. And so I felt very comfortable serving in that church. Little did I know at the time that I would eventually become a United Methodist pastor.
Yeah.
And so it was a wonderful time in my life.
Do you play other instruments, or do you sing, or what other musical abilities do you have?
It's mainly playing the organ and keyboard, but organ more than piano, and singing. I've done a lot of singing over the years as well.
Wow. Could you share with me some of your memories of that church that you grew up in?
Well, I come from a long history of Mennonites, going back to the 1700s when Mennonites immigrated to America from Germany and Switzerland. So that's in my blood. And I grew up in the most progressive branch of the Mennonites, the General Conference Mennonite Church. And I was highly steeped in the Mennonite faith. I had uncles, great uncles that were pastors. And the only issue for me, once I went to college and grad school and kind of felt that tugging in my heart toward ministry, I was told, well, that's great, but women can't be pastors in the Mennonite church. And so that's what I heard after I'd been to college and even when I went to Yale, the graduate school. Mm. So what happened was I decided that I would try to be a Mennonite pastor, even though technically Mennonites did not ordain women. I remember talking to the wife of the pastor at my home church in Pennsylvania, expressing that, I was at Yale, I was studying music, but I was also taking some seminary classes, and I was feeling that tug toward ministry. And she said, well, Laurie, it would be great if every woman pastor were like you, but because that's not the case, we can't allow any women to be pastors. And so I kind of got shut down, which was not unexpected. But I kept at it, and I eventually was able to be ordained in the General Conference Mennonite Church because ordinations were done in the local church, and the pastor at my church at the time was willing to go through the process, and the church council was willing to consider my ordination. So that was a long process in and of itself, but I eventually was ordained in November of 1982 in the General Conference Mennonite Church, but I never served a Mennonite church.
Hmm. Tell me about that sense of call. Where did that come from? When did you first start feeling that you were called to ministry?
I think I felt the call as a child, but as would probably be the case with most children, since I had no role models, I never even knew that there were women pastors. I never saw a woman pastor in my life until I was in graduate school. Living at Yale Divinity School and also studying music, and I was living in a dorm with other women who were planning to become pastors, and that was the very first time that I really realized that it is possible. And what I learned, being in seminary as well, is that the call that I felt toward church music was probably a displaced call to ministry. I gravitated to church music because I always wanted to work in the church. I never wanted to do anything other than work in the church. But since pastoral ministry wasn't an option to me,
right,
I kind of gravitated toward music instead, thinking I can be a director of music in a church, and that will satisfy that call.
Sure. Do you still get to play music today?
Well, Joe, I have not touched an organ for about 7 years. and occasionally I would play for a church service, or I would play a prelude or a postlude. One of the churches I served for many years had an organist concert every year where organists from the church would play. But as my life got more complicated, serving a very large church and then being elected a bishop, I realized that playing the organ could not be a high priority for me because, number one, there were many other things on my plate, but number two, you can't just sit down in your house and play an organ.
I was thinking that, yeah.
And that's very complicated.
But you kind of need one nearby in order to be able to practice.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's right. I will tell you this. I made a promise about a year ago. One of our churches here in Iowa, United Methodist Churches, was ravaged by a tornado last March.
Oh, no.
And their church in Muscatine, Iowa, happened to have the largest pipe organ in the whole state.
Oh, wow.
And that pipe organ was completely destroyed in the tornado. I was fortunate to be in the area making some other visits, and so I was able to visit the church the day after the tornado. It happened late at night, and that next day I was able to be there in the afternoon visiting with the pastor and folks at the church, and I said to them, I used to play the organ. I said, when you get that organ rebuilt, just let me know, and I'll come and play a piece for the dedicatory recital.
Oh, wonderful!
And so they now have an organ consultant, an organ company, which happens to be, coincidentally or a God thing, the very same organ company in Massachusetts that built the organ in my home Mennonite church in Pennsylvania.
Oh my goodness!
The same organ builder.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to the promise that I made, because that means it's going to get me to sit on an organ bench and do some practicing.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. I also wanted to talk about, you wrote a book. It's called Recess, Rediscovering Play and Purpose. Can you tell me about the book?
Sure. When I was serving a large church as a younger pastor with 3 children in school, I was really getting burned out. I was serving First United Methodist Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan with my husband, Gary. The church was growing pretty quickly, and there was a lot on our plate. We had 3 kids in school, and I got to the point where I was burned out. And I was just doing too much and trying to take too much on my plate. And so finally, I was able to get a Lilly endowment grant. So in 2001, I left my family, and I went away for 3 months to rediscover who I was, and to determine whether I really could continue in ministry, because I knew if I kept up at the pace I was going, I would burn out and I wouldn't be able to last. So I took 3 months away. Most of it was spent in solitude. And out of that time, I did a lot of writing and eventually published this book a number of years later. But that was where I think I grew up in the ministry and realized what I needed to do in order to sustain myself and create a good spiritual life and set priorities that would enable me to have a sustainable ministry that was effective, but one that also gave me enough room and enough space to take care of my spirit and my body.
Sure. Are there some general tips that you learned that you could share?
I think so. Now, I have to make a disclaimer that I haven't always been able to follow the tips that I offer to others.
Sure.
I try, but my nature is such that I'm someone who works really hard and finds it difficult to rest. But what I learned from that I think others can take away is, first of all, we have to set aside time for our family and for our own spirits. I wasn't very good at that, and I'm still not very good at that. But I began taking retreat weeks once a year, and I began trying to take a day or two now and then just to go away and work on sermons. If I had night meetings, I tried to be sure that I took time in the late afternoon to go home and to decompress and to be with my kids and not just work all the way through. As I mentioned in the book, there were more times than I would like to admit when I got up and went to an early meeting before my kids got up for school. And sometimes I didn't get home at night until after they went to bed.
Yeah.
And I am not, I regret very much when that happened and realized that it was not good for me and it was not good for them. So I tried to make adjustments in my schedule, and I also got a spiritual director when I came back from that and met with her once a month for many years.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And that's some stuff that I think all of us can kind of follow along with as we feel ourselves being overwhelmed with all of the things that we have to do. One of the questions I like to ask all of the bishops is, and you may have already answered this, but what are some things that you like to do today to just relax, or that you do just for the fun of it?
Well, I love to do and try to make a daily habit of, and I have for many years, is to get outside and get some physical exercise. I'm a runner, and I've been running for 40 years, and it is just great for me to be outside, to get away from everything. I turn my phone off. I also ride a bike. I've done triathlons. So
Wow.
For me, preparing for races, I've run the Boston Marathon 10 times, and to prepare for something that is not work, that helps to keep me healthy physically and mentally and emotionally, is what keeps me alive in ministry, even as a bishop. So for me, I have to get that exercise done in the morning before I go to work, or else it doesn't ever happen. But I'm pretty strict. I would say pretty religious about taking care of my body.
And how long have you been running? I think I misheard you. I think I heard 4 years, and clearly that's not right.
Yeah. 40.
40 years.
40
okay.
years. Yeah.
Wow. And you said 10 Boston marathons?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
And triathlons.
I've done 3 Ironman triathlons and smaller ones as well.
Oh my goodness.
And some long bike rides, and I do a lot of hiking as well. Sometimes long distance hiking.
So that must be a really important part of your kind of keeping yourself spiritually, physically, and mentally healthy.
Yes, it is, Joe. What I've realized over the years is I try to look back on my childhood is that physical activity and being outside, athletics, was always important to me. I cannot sit still. I need to move. I participated in most of the sports that were offered at the time that I went to high school. And so I realized that being physically active is life-giving to me, and the very worst thing that I can think of is sitting all day, which I do most days.
I was going to say, as a bishop, you're in meetings, I would imagine, quite a bit, but it's good you have opportunity to get out and do those things that you love. One last question that I ask every guest of Get Your Spirit in Shape is, what practice keeps you grounded in your spiritual life that you would recommend others try?
I think for me, spiritual disciplines not only include daily devotions, but my disciplines, as for everybody who's a preacher, the practice and discipline of writing is something that feeds my spirit. And it's not only preparing for sermons, but I have been writing a weekly blog called Leading from the Heart ever since 2006.
Wow.
That's when I became a district superintendent. And in an effort to communicate regularly with the churches and clergy on my district, I started writing a weekly blog. There's a couple weeks a year when I'm on vacation that I don't write. There's been every week for now. This is the 12th year. So that is a spiritual discipline for me. And also just being outside, walking. I see that as a discipline as well.
Bishop Laurie, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It has been a real pleasure getting to meet you.
Thank you, Joe, and I'm just so grateful that you're doing these podcasts. It's a great way for people to get to know others and also be inspired in our own faith walk.
That was United Methodist Bishop Laurie Haller of the Iowa Conference of the United Methodist Church. To listen to more great conversations with our bishops, go to umc.org/podcasts. There you'll find our United Methodist Bishops' Faith Stories page. There are other United Methodist podcasts to explore there as well. Also, if you have a moment, please review Get Your Spirit in Shape on iTunes. Great reviews help people find us. Thanks for listening. I'll be back soon with another conversation to help keep our souls as healthy as our bodies. I'm Joe Iavino. Peace.